Hello everyone, this is your boy Feltouch here and welcome back to the Blue Monday Manchester City podcast. It's a pleasure to have you all listening again. Hopefully you all enjoyed last week's podcast. We had lots to talk about. This week a lot less because of the international break, where we've seen many of Manchester City's players fly out all across the globe and get injured as per usual, which is always nice to see. It seems to be a typical theme which happens every single international break, and it's nice to see City players continuing this long-standing tradition where they go on international break and come back injured for a couple of weeks, which is always a pleasure to see. But today's podcast we're going to be talking about a few things which you don't usually do, things like transfers, of course previewing the upcoming game against Arsenal, also talking about some of the rumours and stuff around Manchester City and topical debates as well. So first of all, I suppose we'll start off by talking about the international break and some of the successes of the England players. Of course, Raheem Sterling only played once. Leroy Sané featured against Manchester City. Leroy Sané featured against England in a friendly game. He didn't really impress too much in that game, but he was playing a slightly different role to what he does at Manchester City and also playing against a different system. He still looked pretty decent in the fixture. Of course, Raheem Sterling as well picked up an assist last night, helping out Jermaine Defoe score the first goal with a lovely piece of skill. And hopefully, he's impressing lots of people who previously in the past said that Sterling's crap, he doesn't do the job international duty. Well, yesterday he proved that he was able to do it and he seemed pretty decent in that game. On top of that, John Stones also started for England in yesterday's fixture against Lithuania. He didn't really have all too much to do, but seemed fairly impressive. Of course, Manchester City loanee Joe Hart was in goal. Made one or two errors, of course, was a offside decision which probably should have been given in England's favour, but nonetheless he still didn't have all too much to do in that fixture. But his passing in the last couple of games has perhaps shown Pep Guardiola where he was wrong with Joe Hart, which is one thing I like to see, that he's able to prove the doubters wrong, which is nice to see from Joe Hart's perspective. Now, with the upcoming Arsenal game, Arsenal are not in the best of form, and it's usually high tide that when teams aren't in good form, they put in a good performance against City. It seems to happen a lot of times, but Arsenal have lost 4 of their last 5 games. Their last win came in the Premier League. This is 4 of the last 5 Premier League games, and their last win was on the 11th of February against Hull City, and that seems like a very, very long time ago, especially for Arsenal fans. But the good news for Arsenal's perspective, perhaps, is that Mesut Ozil could be making a return. I mean, he's probably one of their most integral players. Whether I rate him or not, that's a different matter aside, because the last time he played against City, he was absolutely abysmal in the fixture. He picked up an assist in the game, but did absolutely nothing for the rest of the game. Arsenal fans, they seem to like him, and then they seem to dislike him at the same time. Whether City play a very high pressing game, whether he'll be able to get involved in the fixture or not, I don't know, but it could always be an interesting game, especially against a team like Arsenal where we haven't had the best of form in more recent years. Of course, it nearly ruined our title chances when Mikel Arteta scored against City quite a few years ago, but luckily enough we were still able to do it, and now he's allowed to sit on our bench and be part of our coaching staff. So there you go. But nonetheless, if Ozil's back, it'll probably change the complexion perhaps for the Arsenal team. They've still got some good players in their side despite their performances being very poor recently. But my biggest hope is that City win. We go straight onto Arsenal Fan TV and we have a good laugh. But that is the biggest hope. Now, problems for City are that Kevin De Bruyne or Kevin De Bruyne, however fancy you wish to say, we should probably nickname this section of the podcast the Kevin De Groin, because he's injured his groin playing for international duty for Belgium. Roberto Martinez has gone ahead and got him injured. The biggest clown of international football managerial stance. How he's got the job at Belgium. The best generation of Belgian players perhaps will ever have. It's their golden generation. It's England's 1966 team. For us, I mean, it's just sort of laughable that Roberto Martinez got the job. A guy who relegated Wigan, was absolutely abysmal with Everton. I really don't understand how this clown's got the job. But nonetheless, put that aside, Kevin De Bruyne's injured. He's a big doubt for this game this weekend. He hasn't travelled, as far as we know, to Russia for the Tuesday fixture, which Belgium are playing. So it's unlikely that he's going to be playing at the weekend. Is that a big miss, however? He hasn't been in the best of form recently. Of course, he got the assist the other day. He's probably created the most clear-cut chances, apparently, in the Premier League this season. However, his form as of late hasn't been as good. Certainly this year, he hasn't scored as many goals, but he's playing in a slightly different position. He's a lot deeper. He's been given different different roles from Pep Guardiola, and perhaps I would like to see him perhaps play a little bit more advanced, but then the problem is that Silva can't play in the same position, so it's trying to find a compromise between the two, because this year Silva's got a lot better, or shown markedly better results. He just needs to add a few more goals to his game, and he did that for Spain the other day. Why he can't do it for City, I don't quite know. He seems to always score goals for Spain. But for City, it seems to be a different reason. I don't really know why. Maybe it's a different style of play. But we're trying to integrate this sort of Spanish style of football into the Premier League and the way we play under Guardiola. But I don't know. But De Bruyne, he hasn't been of the best of form recently. Who will come in instead of him, I don't know. But hopefully we'll see Fernandinho and perhaps Touré playing in midfield. I'm not the biggest fan of Yaya Touré these days, especially when he's left by himself in midfield. As I explained in the last podcast, I feel like he needs somebody who's able to do the running alongside him, and hopefully Fernandinho could be the man who does that, so I'd like to see him returning in midfield. Hopefully, we'll see Sanya playing at right back again, or Zabaleta. I'm not too fussed, but perhaps because Sanya's an ex-Arsenal player, it might add a little bit more fight to his game in that sort of fixture. Gael Clichy will probably play at left back. Kolarov will probably play at centre back again, just because we always like to shoot ourselves in the foot early doors. Whether he'll play at centre back or left back, I don't know, but hopefully he will not be involved in the fixture from my perspective. I'm not Kolarov's biggest fan at all, but nonetheless, I still think it'll be an enticing fixture. It's really important a game for us, just based on the table. I mean, we've got 28 games played, the same as Tottenham, same as Chelsea. Liverpool have got one more, Manchester United got one less, and we're on 57 points in third place. Tottenham are on 59 points in second place, and Chelsea, you can forget about them, but it's more about concentrating on getting the top four at this stage. Liverpool are on 56 points from 29 games played, but in terms of our perspective, we really need to start picking up some wins, and at the moment, we have been better away from home this season than we have been at home, so you never know, it could be a good omen for us. It's a huge week and a half for Manchester City. Of course, we've got the Chelsea game coming up after that, which we're going to preview in next week's podcast. But, I mean, it's a huge week. If we can potentially get 2 wins on the road, I mean, it will really change the complexion of this season and how many people perhaps feel about Pep Guardiola as a manager, because there are certain grievances about some of the way he's been playing, myself included. I find him perhaps too stubborn and too willing to make changes too quickly instead of just maybe keeping along with certain systems and not changing it as much, trying to reinvent the wheel. I sometimes find a big problem with Guardiola in that perspective. But nonetheless, it's a really big weekend. Arsenal are down in 6th place. They are 7 points behind us, but they've also got a game in hand on us as well. So whether we'll be able to keep a win, it really keeps them down there. It keeps United at a nice distance away, and Liverpool as well, who have got a big game this weekend. It's, of course, the big derby as well. So we're going to talk about transfers in this episode, so which we haven't really done at all in this entire series, and the first one to talk about is Joe Hart. Now, it seems like he's pretty much confirmed to leave. He's talked about this a few times in interviews. He feels like he's had his day at Manchester City, and I think it's probably the right thing to say, just because of the way Guardiola's been so negative towards him, and I don't think he's going to ever compromise and say, yeah, look, I turn around and say, look, I've got this wrong, perhaps Joe Hart should come back. I don't think he ever will do that. Now, another one is Eliakim Mangala, another player out on loan. Apparently, according to a lot of stuff which I've read recently, he's been playing pretty well for Valencia recently. They've had a big upturn in form recently. They were very close to the relegation zone, but suddenly they've had a spike in form and they are vastly improving. Whether Mangala is the main man who could be involved in Manchester City next season, I highly doubt it. But he's wanted by Valencia allegedly, but they want his wages to be cut. That's something which is going to have to be negotiated between him and Valencia. Allegedly, he's on £110,000 a week. That is right. Eliakim Mangala, a defender who at Manchester City could barely defend, is wanted for £110,000 a week. That's how much he's on. So whether he will move to Valencia or not, I don't know. I don't know if there's a pre-contract agreement sort of thing in place where there's a negotiated transfer fee, perhaps if he wants to make it a permanent deal or not, I don't know. But if he does go to Valencia, it's not really a huge miss for City. It's just a question as to whether we can recoup as much money as we potentially can, because of course we spent £35 million plus allegedly on Mangala, a defender who can't defend. I mean, is it Tixty Begiristain or Brian Marwood? Whichever one of the two is involved in the recruitment process of Elikin Mangala. They really, really have had a shocker in recent years. It's kind of embarrassing when you look at some of the defensive signings we have made. Now, the next one is, of course, Jesus Navas, a player who is on his contract's ending at the end of the season, and he is wanted by Sevilla. I think he'd quite happily move back to Seville, and it's probably much because he hasn't been able to score or play very much recently. I mean, he hasn't scored in something like 2.5 years for Manchester City. He really isn't the best of players, I have to say. His work rate is unquestionable. He likes to put in a good amount of effort into the game. He can't cross his legs, he can't put a good ball into the box, and he can't score, which is a massive problem. And whether he'll be at City in the summer, I hugely doubt it. I don't think he'd want to stay. I don't think this club would want him to stay. I think he's 30 years of age now. What's the point? He doesn't really play anyway. And there's lots of rumours around us trying to sign people like Kingsley Coman, for example, or perhaps even us seeing some of the younger lads from the academy come through. I mean, Brahim Diaz plays in that sort of role. He can play out wide, similar to the way Navas plays. So perhaps we could see some of the younger players from the academy perhaps step up in future. Jadon Sancho, people like that, good wingers at the Manchester City Football Club. And the final transfer rumour of leaving Manchester City is Samir Nasri. The player has sold his £5.5 million Prestbury house in the last couple of days, which seems to suggest that he definitely will not be at Manchester City next season. The Sevilla player currently out on loan. He stated previously in the season how he'd fallen out of love with football, this sort of rumours. But at the end of the day, he scored and helped set up a goal against West Ham very early on in the season. He seemed to pretty much impress me in that game. I was a pretty big fan of Nasri, to be honest with you, at Manchester City. I always quite liked seeing him play. The problem was where he fitted into the Manchester City side. The year where we won the Premier League title under Pellegrini, he was probably one of our best players that season. He was integral in helping us win the league that season, and of course he did score in that West Ham fixture in the last game of the season. Now, the problem with Nasri is trying to find a place for him to play in the Manchester City team, and he was a little bit overweight at times last season. He's getting a little bit on in terms of age. He's still a quality footballer, that is undeniable, but as you saw in the Leicester fixture where he got himself sent off, he can be a bit temperamental at times. And I don't think he's another player which will be... I think he's a player which will be leaving Manchester City next summer. Whether he'll be joining Sevilla or not, I don't know. We'll have to see, but it doesn't look like he's going to be playing for Manchester City. Now, there's also a couple of transfer rumours of players wanting to join Manchester City. As per usual, there's links especially surrounding the goalkeepers. Now, Claudio Bravo, whether he'll be at City or not next season, I hope he isn't. It's nothing against the guy. He seems like a lovely fella. It's just the fact that he's not a very good goalkeeper, and we need a good goalkeeper. If you look at Manchester United every single season, people like David De Gea save United about 6-7 points plus a season. Have we got someone like that at City at the moment? Willy Caballero's doing his best, but he's not a long-term solution. The guy's 34 years of age. I love Willy to bits. You could really change the way I said that sentence. That's probably going to end up in a few years. If I ever get more than 1,400 subscribers, if I get 2,000 subscribers, someone's going to change that and just have I love Willy somewhere. Yeah, I do love Willy Caballero. He's a fantastic fella. But nonetheless, Willy Caballero is a legend. He's a gentleman. But he's not the future of Manchester City goalkeepers. It's a short-term solution at the moment. And it seems like we're linked with a few goalkeepers. Donnarumma, of course, over in Italy. We were linked with having a €150 million offer for him. I mean, that's the most ridiculous rumour I've ever seen in my life. It's never going to happen. And if I were him, I would never leave AC Milan. He would always be a club legend there. Fantastic supporter base, superb stadium. Whether he will ever want to improve, maybe I could see him perhaps go to Juventus maybe, but I don't see him coming to the English football leagues. It's far too soon. I don't want to see him get ruined in England with our press and our media, the way people seem to condemn footballers quite a lot. But whether he'll play or not at City in the future, I highly doubt it, especially for €150 million. That just doesn't make sense. I know he's only 17, 18 years of age, but even still, it seems like a ridiculous amount of money. And the other one, of course, is Ederson, the goalkeeper from Benfica. Now, I've only seen this guy play once in real life, and that was the recent fixture against Borussia Dortmund, and he was very, very impressive in that game. He's only 23 years of age. Allegedly, he has around a €50 million buyout clause as well, associated associated with him. So whether City will be willing to stump that figure up or not, I don't know. I'm sure they'll probably be able to negotiate a deal. But as ever, I'm always unsure about signing Portuguese league players. I've only seen one player ever who's actually come out of that league really impressed me in other leagues, in more recent years anyway, apart from people like Deco, Ricardo Carvalho, those sort of players. But Ronaldo, of course, is the big one. But in terms of for City, we haven't signed a good player from the Portuguese league ever, as far as I'm concerned. So as far, whether we be signing Ederson or not, I think we do need another goalkeeper, and the rumours at the moment are very highly linking him with Manchester City. He's been liking Manchester City Instagram posts and things like that. Very pathetic attempts to link him with City, but nonetheless it could be a sign. I'm not going to read into it too much, but it could look like he could be the man in goal for Manchester City next season instead of Joe Hart. Now the other players that we've been linked with, two left backs as well, that is Danny Rose and Jose Luis Gaya at Valencia. Apparently Gaya's done pretty well recently, as I said earlier with Mangala, that Valencia had a little bit of an upturn in form, and it's been enough to convince Pep Guardiola that those sort of players, especially Gaya, could be involved at Manchester City next season. Whether it'll happen or not, I don't know, but he seems like a fairly decent player. He's a young player, Spanish left back. Whether he'll be able to adapt to the ruggedness of the Premier League or not, I don't know, but we'll have to see. Another player is Danny Rose, a player everybody knows. I'm not the biggest fan of Danny Rose in terms of who he is as a person and his attitude on the football pitch. Whenever he's played against City, he's been a bit of a cheat, to be honest with you. But in terms of his footballing ability and his defensive attributes, I think he's a very good footballer, English footballer as well, which fills lots of quotas as well. Now, that's all the transfer rumours covered. I'm sure there's plenty of others. We're always linked with people all the time, and you can only read so much into them. So don't go off what I'm saying and say, yeah, it's a fact, those players are coming to the club. I'm hardly Guillaume Balaguer. I'm not the guy like him who sits there every single day and claims he knows every transfer before it's ever happened. Now, the final thing to talk about in today's podcast is the recent fines against Manchester City from the FA and also from UEFA. Now, from UEFA, we received fines from the Monaco fixture for a fan entering the pitch, alleged disturbances, and also from the game kicking off 2 minutes late. 2 minutes late. And we got something like £25,000 of fines in total from those. And we also received a £15,000 fine as well from the FA last week for surrounding the referee when he gave a dodgy penalty against Liverpool. Now, if you look at the pictures, the players are surrounding him. There's about 5-6 players, and I think you're not allowed to surround the referee with more than 5 players, and then it's a fine. Now, I am very much in favour of respecting referees, and I'm very much behind that campaign. But when the referees have such poor games, it sort of has to be questioned. The FA has to think, well, maybe it's the referee's fault. If he continuously makes poor decisions, then of course players are going to get riled. It's just the nature of the game and the nature of any sport. People will always get annoyed if referees are constantly making incorrect decisions. And if you look at the pictures, the players are stood around him quietly. There's only one person actually talking to the referee, Michael Oliver, but nonetheless we've been fined. At the end of the day, it's pennies to a club like Manchester City, but still it's very frustrating, and as it just goes to prove why so many fans, especially City fans, are very much against UEFA. We're not against the UEFA competitions. We love playing in the Champions League, but we don't like UEFA. We don't like the way they're running European football and the way they have treated fans, especially Manchester City fans, in the past, especially games like the game over in Russia against CSKA Moscow, where fans were banned from the game, yet still over 1,000 fans were able to get into the fixture. It incredibly frustrates Manchester City fans, and the constant fines against City, especially over fair play and things like that, which seems like it's been directed specifically against City, it's very frustrating. And more on another point as well, which is very frustrating, while I'm on this rant as well about the FA and the Champions League and all these other competitions, why are Manchester City playing on the Sunday in the FA Cup semi-final against Arsenal at 3 o'clock kickoff? Why? On that day, there's the London Marathon, so the transfer networks are already stretched at best on those sort of days. Add in all these fans coming up from Manchester, also fans from Arsenal. Okay, it's not as big an issue because Wembley's in North London, where Arsenal are from. But nonetheless, the tube networks, the rail networks, they're going to be incredibly stretched on that day. Why not put us on the Saturday? We're the only team which it has to come from outside of London, and you put this on the Sunday, so it's incredibly difficult for fans to get back, especially if you're booking trains, if you're booking lots of other things. You might even be booking a flight down to London, for example, but it's an absolute nightmare for Manchester City fans. Why is the game not on a Saturday? And this is the reason why City fans are so aggrieved with people in the FA and also UEFA, all these other different factions, because it feels at times that people are against City and against football fans in general, especially when fans are being punished. It seems like so many times where we're being shifted on a Sunday at 3 o'clock, have to head down from Manchester. Why in the first place we have to play at Wembley, I'm not the biggest fan of anymore. If you're a team like Tottenham, you're going to be playing there at home next season anyway. Chelsea, City, Arsenal, these sort of clubs, you play at Wembley all the time. Why these games have to be held at Wembley, I don't know. Why they can't be at a neutral ground, for example, at Aston Villa, is perfect for me because I live 10 minutes away from Aston Villa, but that's a different issue. But nonetheless, why it has to be in London, it favours surely the London teams, and it frustrates people like Manchester City fans who have to travel from Manchester. So it just annoys me. That's my rant over. We've got a huge game against Arsenal. We're going to preview the Chelsea fixture next week. Thank you very, very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. This is also available on SoundCloud for you to listen to on the go. Thank you very much. Arrivederci.